Somewhere between a caveman throwing a spear at a predator twice his size and a grown man today struggling to put his phone down for 5 minutes, something happened to the human body. In this video, we're going to look at testosterone, the hormone tied to strength, drive, and confidence, and compare what it actually looked like in ancient humans versus what it looks like in the average man today. We'll get into how ancient people lived day to day, what actually gave them motivation and reward before phones, before jobs, before any of this existed, and why that reward system, dopamine, worked completely differently for them than it does for you. Then we'll bring it all into the present and break down exactly what's quietly draining testosterone in modern life and why easy dopamine, the kind sitting in your pocket right now, might be the biggest reason for it. By the end, you'll understand why your body still runs on 40,000-year-old chemistry, even though nothing around you does anymore. So sit back and enjoy the video. You wake up before the sun. Your body doesn't need an alarm because it's already synced to light and darkness. Within an hour, you're moving, tracking, lifting, throwing. By midday, you might have carried a kill for 6 miles or wrestled another man for status in front of your entire camp. By nightfall, you're sitting by a fire, muscles sore, stomach full, surrounded by people who saw exactly what you did today. Now compare that to your Tuesday. You wake up to a phone screen. You sit for 9 hours. Nobody watches what you accomplish. Nobody knows if you succeeded or failed today, because most of what you do leaves no physical trace at all. 2 lives, same species, wildly different bodies. And at the center of that difference is a hormone most people only think about when they're worried they don't have enough of it, testosterone. For a long time, scientists assumed hormone levels were mostly fixed by biology and evolution, that a man today should have roughly the same testosterone as a man 40,000 years ago. But when researchers actually went looking for populations still living close to an ancestral lifestyle, what they found didn't match modern assumptions at all. In the early 2000s, a team of anthropologists led by Michael Gervin and Ben Trumbull began studying the Tsimane, an indigenous population in the Bolivian Amazon who still hunt, fish, and farm, using methods that resemble how humans lived for most of our history. They measured testosterone in these men across ordinary days, and something interesting showed up. Testosterone wasn't just high, it was responsive. It spiked sharply on the days men went hunting, and spiked even higher on the days they came home successful. A missed hunt barely moved the needle. A successful one sent it climbing. The hormone wasn't just a background number, it was reacting to real, physical, socially visible achievement. This lines up with something researchers call the challenge hypothesis, the idea that testosterone rises in response to status competition and effort that actually matters to survival and reproduction. In small hunter-gatherer groups, status wasn't given, it was earned in front of everyone every single day. You proved your value through your body, your skill, your contribution to the group's survival. There was no ambiguity about who provided, who protected, who could be relied on. And the body rewarded that constant, visible competence with hormonal reinforcement. Now stack on top of that the rest of the ancestral lifestyle, because testosterone doesn't exist in isolation. It's shaped by sleep, movement, diet, sunlight, and stress, and ancient humans had a version of all 4 that looks almost nothing like ours. Start with movement. Modern fitness culture treats exercise as a scheduled event you fit into your day. For most of human history, there was no separation between moving and living. Persistence hunting alone could mean tracking an animal on foot for 3 to 6 hours across open terrain, at a pace just fast enough to keep the animal moving until it overheated and collapsed. Add foraging, tool making, building shelter, carrying children, hauling water. The average day involved far more full-body, functional movement than almost any modern job or gym routine. But it wasn't exhausting in the way a forced workout is, because it was woven into purpose. You weren't lifting weights for the sake of lifting them. You were lifting because a shelter needed to be built or a kill needed to be carried home. Then there's sunlight. Ancient humans spent nearly their entire waking day outdoors, which meant constant exposure to natural light cycles. This mattered more than people realize because light exposure regulates the circadian rhythm, and circadian rhythm regulates testosterone production, which peaks during deep sleep in the early morning hours. A body that sees real daylight all day and real darkness all night produces hormones on a completely different schedule than a body staring at a screen until midnight under artificial light. Sleep itself was different too. Historical records and sleep studies from before the era of artificial lighting suggest humans often slept in two phases: a first sleep of several hours, a period of quiet wakefulness in the dark, and then a second sleep. Deep, uninterrupted dark sleep is when the body does most of its hormonal repair work, and ancient humans without blue light devices flooding their eyes at 11 p.m. were almost certainly getting more of it and better quality of it than the average person today. Diet matters here too, though it's more complicated than people assume. Ancient humans weren't eating some perfectly optimized bodybuilder meal plan. Diets varied wildly by region and season, but broadly, they were eating whole, unprocessed foods, getting enough healthy fat and protein to support hormone production, and they weren't consuming the flood of refined sugar and industrial seed oils that make up a huge share of the modern diet, both of which have been linked in research to lower testosterone and higher body fat, which itself converts testosterone into estrogen through an enzyme called aromatase. And then there's stress. Maybe the most misunderstood piece of all. Ancient life absolutely had stress. Predators, disease, food scarcity in hard seasons, the very real threat of dying young. But that stress was almost always acute. Something happened, your body responded, and then it resolved one way or another. Modern stress is different. It's chronic. It doesn't resolve. It's a slow, constant drip from financial pressure, notifications, comparison, a job you can't walk away from, uncertainty that never fully lifts. And chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated for long stretches of time, and cortisol and testosterone have an inverse relationship. When one stays high for too long, the other tends to drop. So when you add it together, more functional movement, more natural light, deeper sleep, a diet without modern processed sugar, and stress that resolved instead of lingering, you get a hormonal environment that consistently favored higher testosterone. This isn't guesswork. It's backed by a body of research showing measurable declines in average testosterone across modern populations. A widely cited study published in 2007 by researcher Thomas Travison and colleagues found that testosterone levels in American men had dropped significantly across generations, even after accounting for age, meaning a 60-year-old man in the 1990s had noticeably lower testosterone than a 60-year-old man measured decades earlier. This wasn't a fluke. Multiple studies since have found similar downward trends across different countries. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because testosterone is only half the story. The other half is dopamine, and dopamine is what actually made the ancient lifestyle feel worth living, not just biologically, but emotionally. Dopamine isn't really the pleasure chemical people think it is. It's the anticipation and motivation chemical. It's what drives you toward a goal, and it spikes hardest right before or right at the moment of achieving something meaningful. In ancient life, dopamine was almost always earned through effort. You tracked an animal for hours and the payoff came when you finally made the kill. You spent days collecting shells and drilling holes through them with stone tools, and the payoff came when the necklace was finished and worn. You practiced throwing a spear for years, and the payoff came the moment your aim finally became reliable. Every dopamine hit in that world was connected to a real, physical, often social accomplishment, and because it was hard to get, the brain's reward system stayed sensitive to it. Small wins felt genuinely satisfying because they were earned. This is also why ancient humans, even with all that survival pressure, still had enormous amounts of leisure and social time. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, like the work of Richard Lee among the Juhuansi and similar studies among the Hadza in Tanzania, consistently find that these groups spend only around 15 to 20 hours a week on actual survival tasks. The rest of the time was filled with storytelling, grooming, resting, making art, and simply talking. Analysis of recorded conversations among modern hunter-gatherer groups found that a huge share of nighttime conversation around the fire, some studies put it as high as 80%, was pure storytelling. Myths, jokes, tales of ancestors, none of it necessary for survival in any direct sense. It was dopamine too, just a slower, social, relationship-based kind, built through connection instead of consumption. But here's the part almost nobody talks about, the part that explains why so many men today feel restless, unmotivated, and flat, even when their life looks fine on paper. Now bring that entire picture into the present day, because this is where the contrast becomes almost uncomfortable. The average person today carries a device that can deliver a dopamine hit in under 1 second. No tracking an animal for 6 hours. No drilling a shell by hand. No days of practice. Just a swipe, and the brain gets a reward signal. Social media platforms are engineered by teams of behavioral scientists specifically to maximize this. Every like, every notification, every autoplay video is a tiny, unpredictable reward. And unpredictable rewards are, according to decades of behavioral psychology research going back to B.F. Skinner's work on variable reinforcement, the single most addictive pattern there is. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines so effective. The problem isn't that this feels good. The problem is what happens after. Addiction researcher and psychiatrist Anna Lemke, who wrote extensively on this exact issue, describes the brain as operating on a kind of balance. Every dopamine spike is followed by an equal and opposite dip below baseline, and the more frequent and intense the spikes, the deeper and longer the dips become. Ancient dopamine was rare and earned, so the dips were shallow and the baseline stayed healthy. Modern dopamine is constant and free, so the brain adjusts by lowering its baseline sensitivity just to cope with the volume. That's why so many people today describe feeling numb, unmotivated, or bored even when nothing is technically wrong. Their reward system has been recalibrated by thousands of tiny, cheap hits a day, and now anything that requires real effort, exercise, deep work, a real conversation, a slow hobby, feels flat by comparison. It can't compete with a phone that fires a reward every few seconds. And this connects directly back to testosterone, because the same forces are hitting both systems at once. The sedentary hours spent on a screen replace the physical movement that used to support hormone production. The blue light from that same screen at night delays melatonin and disrupts the deep sleep where testosterone is produced. The instant gratification from that same screen trains the brain to avoid the kind of slow, effortful, delayed reward activities, lifting, building, mastering a skill that historically both raised testosterone and produced genuine dopamine. It's not one problem, it's a loop, where low effort lowers testosterone, and low testosterone lowers motivation to put in effort, and the phone is sitting right there the entire time offering an easier option. Lay it all side by side and the pattern is impossible to miss. Movement then was constant and purposeful. Movement now is optional and rare. Sunlight then was all day, every day. Sunlight now is minutes, if that. Sleep then was deep and dark. Sleep now is shallow and lit by a screen. Dopamine then was earned through hours of effort. Dopamine now is free and instant, delivered 100 times a day. Stress then hit hard and then resolved. Stress now never fully turns off. Different pieces, same direction, and every single one of them points the same way, down. None of this means modern life is worthless or that you need to live in a forest to fix your biology. Humans didn't survive because their environment was easy. They survived because they were adaptable, and that adaptability still exists in every person alive today. The body that made a Tsimane hunter's testosterone spike after a good day of tracking is the same body you're walking around in right now. It still responds to real physical effort. It still rewards delayed, earned achievement more deeply than instant ones. It still needs sunlight, real sleep, and movement to run the way it was built to run. The chemistry hasn't changed in 40,000 years, only the environment around it has. Somewhere between a man throwing a spear at a saber-toothed cat and a man doom-scrolling at 1 a.m., we traded a body that had to work for everything for a world that hands us everything instantly, and it turns out the body never asked for that trade. It's still waiting for you to earn something. And maybe that's the simplest takeaway here. You don't need to hunt or build a shelter to reset any of this. You just need to give your body one real, effortful, earned win today, something with no shortcut, and let it work the way it was designed to. If this kind of deep dive into how ancient life shaped who we are today is something you're into, there's a lot more of it coming, so stick around for that. But for now, here's the question worth sitting with. If your body still runs on the same chemistry as a hunter who had to earn every single reward, what is it quietly waiting for you to go out and earn today? Something tells me the answer isn't on your phone. Thanks for watching, and until next time.